All right, I'll kick this off and get this show on the road. So my name is not Deis Events. My name is Seth Goings, and I am the VP of Engineering here at Deis. And I wanted to first discuss a little bit about this meeting and what we're doing at Deis, and then lead us into a little bit of clarifying vision for what we're doing during this time here. So Deis, the company, is all about making Kubernetes easier to use. And we have about 4 or 5 different engagements that we're running right now. And we have 3 projects, so to speak, that are open source engagements. There's Workflow, which is the easiest way to build, deploy, and manage 12-factor applications in Kubernetes. I think that's what brings us all here today, is the history of this meeting being the Deis V1 platform as a service that looks suspiciously similar to Heroku. And if you want an entry point, at least a technical entry point to the project, and you don't already know about it, your entry point is this that I just pasted in chat, which is github.com/deis/workflow. You can also go to deis.com, look at the projects on the top header, and that'll lead you eventually to the same point. We have a little bit nicer documentation that's user-focused on deis.com too, if you want to enter that way. Then we have a project called Helm, which is the best way to manage Kubernetes native applications. And that actually, I'll paste another link. The README of the Helm project, Kubernetes Slack channel, where there's continuous discussion about what they're up to. They have a dev community meeting on Thursday at 9:30 Pacific every week. And we also are engaged in something called Steward, which is actually now broken out into 2 projects, Steward CF and Steward Framework. And that project is all about connecting on and off cluster resources in Kubernetes. So we're also working with something called a special interest group centered around service catalog in the Kubernetes project. And so that's a conversation and implementation around how you get Cloud Foundry service brokers working inside of Kubernetes. That's a joint effort between IBM, Google, and Red Hat. And then we also have, if you're relatively new to Kubernetes, we have something that we're co-hosting. Michelle Nurali and Matt Farina from HP run something called SIG apps, which is the best way to see how others are using Kubernetes. There's demos, conversation about upcoming Kubernetes features, and the audience is people that are building things on top of Kubernetes. So it's not the internals, it's not the madness of renaming things most of the time, unless it affects users. So the entry point for that is the link I just posted. And actually I missed, when I was talking about Steward and SIG Service Catalog, there is an upstream repository that you can look at, which is Kubernetes Incubator Service Catalog on GitHub. So I just pasted lots of links for you. You should probably, if you're interested in any of those things I just mentioned, copy that whole wall of text for your reference later. And I can also drop that into the community Slack channel in the Deis Slack. So about this meeting, we used to call this the Deis planning and road mapping session back when Deis was a project and not the company name, or at some time it was project and company name. So there was quite a name collision there, and we changed the name to Deis Community Meeting, which still had a little bit of a semblance of trying to do too many things and not doing any of those things well. So for this meeting, I'm going to adhere to the Unix philosophy of do one thing and do it well, which can be applied to meetings as well. We're engaging in wholly different communities of practice with each project I outlined before, and there are better ways to get into details of those projects through video calls, interactions on GitHub, interactions on Kubernetes Slack channels. And so I want to make this meeting focused on the best way to manage, or making the best way to manage 12-factor applications, which is Deis workflow. I'm not biased at all, and try to make that better. So it's going to have a Deis workflow focus from here on out, which allows us more time and more specificity to focus on just one arena of the communities in which we deal with. So we'll be showcasing some users of workflow in future community meetings. If you want to get scheduled to show what you're up to with workflow, send me an email at seth@deis.com or drop me a message in the Deis Slack. I'm sgoings on the Deis Slack, so you can reach me there. And with that, I want to kick it over to Matt Boersma, who is the project lead on Deis workflow, to give us more details about what's happened with the project recently and what we're up to there. So take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Seth. Can everybody hear me okay? Cool. Yeah, so let's see. Let me review the release and then really quick talk about the switch to Kubernetes Helm and what our plan for Helm Classic deprecation essentially is. So as we talked about last month, we switched from a kind of hectic every 2 weeks release schedule to releasing on the first Thursday of every month. I think that's going to work much better for everybody involved. So that's today. I'd love to be telling you you can go download Workflow v2.9.0, which is supposed to be out today, but we've been in testing for a couple days. Things have gone well. Taking a step back, we have a really robust end-to-end set of tests that you may or may not know about that served us really well. But when it comes time to release, there's a few permutations that we know about, and then we also try and get creative and do a lot more manual testing, at least at this point, until we've got everything automated. We got kind of sideswiped yesterday by an upstream Ubuntu patch to Python 2.7 that I would characterize as a little hasty. It broke Docker Builder. We have a potential fix for that right now, but it's going to take us a little longer to iron it out and retest. So anyway, hopefully tomorrow, or probably at the worst by Monday, we will have a v2.9.0 workflow release that people can install. So the main changes in this release coming up, we have a new Deis labels command that allows you to attach arbitrary labels for your use onto apps. That was a community member contributed all of that, including tests and documentation, and we could not be more happy to get that kind of contribution. Some other changes, Postgres now guarantees a full backup before the container is stopped for whatever reason, whereas before there were potentially some gaps where you might not have gotten a full backup and unless a certain amount of time had expired. So that'll be more robust. If you had a Sidekick application, something that didn't actually need to expose a port, you had to lie and say, I have an exposed port. Now that's not necessary if you mark the app as non-routable, so you can have full non-routable Sidekick apps. We updated monitoring, specifically Grafana has a much nicer, more coherent Kubernetes health dashboard in there. Every single image, and there's a bunch of them, has been upgraded. Its base image was upgraded to Ubuntu Slim 0.5, which gives us the benefit of a lot of security fixes, specifically some stuff that you might have heard about with curl about a month ago. And then, again, we kept all the Heroku build packs and basically all the supporting libraries that were relevant completely up to date as we try to do. And then just another passel of bug fixes in there. So it's a really good release and will be available very soon. Some other stuff that went on that's not strictly part of that is we had some custom code in registry that we jettisoned because most of our patches had actually been accepted upstream and it was not necessary. So now we're actually using Docker's stock registry image now, which simplifies things a little bit. We also took our registry proxy, which we think is pretty nice and definitely better than the one that was in Kubernetes add-ons, and upstream that, and hopefully it'll be merged. They move a little slowly, but there have been no objections to it. So those last two things are part of something we had talked about previously, which is we're trying to contribute more code upstream and also consume more third-party code just to kind of reduce the maintenance burden. So that's what's in the 2.9.0 release. The other big change for this release is by default, we're expecting people to install it with Kubernetes Helm is how we're distinguishing that from Helm Classic that you may have been comfortable with if you've been installing workflow previously. So you'll probably notice if you looked at the docs that we're really only talking about Kubernetes Helm at this point. If you really need to stick with Helm Classic for some reason, we actually don't have a parallel path in the documentation for installation or upgrading. So if you really need to go access that, unfortunately you have to go to the workflow repo and look at the v28 or an earlier tag and look at the source for the docs. It's not that painful, but it seemed like too much work and or kind of confusing to maintain two installation paths in the docs, so we're not going to do that. Because we don't really need to, we have a tool called Workflow Migration. The repo is Deis/workflow migration, and it itself is a Docker image that actually looks at your existing workflow install, promotes it using Tiller and Kubernetes Helm into a full-on new Helm release. And then from that point on, you're good to go. You can upgrade to future releases. It's pretty slick and it works really well. And we do mention that in the docs. So if you need to upgrade, which you really will for this one, or if you need to transfer over to Kubernetes Helm, go run that tool and you're good to go. And speaking of that, I should thank Kirthan and Kirthan Mala and Von Deis for putting in a significant amount of work in getting us converted over to Kubernetes Helm and also making that the default in CI. And while I'm at it, thanks very much to Matt Fisher for everything that he does with the coding and testing and support of all that. He is everywhere all the time. And last thing is Helm Classic deprecation is essentially done at this point because, as I mentioned, we're not actually giving you help installing with Helm Classic, but we will release a Helm Classic v290 chart in the Deis charts repo, just as we have always done for quite a while now. We're just not talking about it. If that's the path you need to follow, it's there. We've already tested upgrading to it. It works fine. But we're intending for that to be the last Helm Classic release of workflow. And from here on out, we'll just be talking about Kubernetes Helm and focusing on that. We've already switched CI over to using only Kubernetes Helm. And so hopefully that's fine for everybody. As I mentioned, the migration tool should get you there easily. But if that is, too abrupt or whatever, please let us know here or elsewhere. We could conceivably do another Helm Classic release if it's really inconvenient for you. It just kind of blows up our test matrix quite a bit. So we're hoping this will be the last Helm Classic release unless someone really screams bloody murder and convinces us. And that's really all I've got to talk about. So if you have any questions, you can type them in chat or just email me. I'm mborsma@deis.com or ask in our Slack community channel. And I just want to thank everybody in the community for being particularly helpful and resourceful. It's really nice to see people answering each other's questions and helping us fix bugs and typos and contribute some features. We're looking forward to keeping that going. Back to you, Seth.
Yeah, there's one more agenda item in this community meeting, which is our plan to end of life Deis v1, which is the Deis platform as a service based on CoreOS Linux. So this was the thing that out of the box used Fleet to schedule containers, and that was pretty much succeeded by Deis workflow in April of this year. So our plan is to end of life that the week of February 13th, 2017. So that's over 9 months from when we've offered this alternative, which is based on top of Kubernetes. So if you are using V1 and there's some reason why you're not enticed to switch to Deis workflow, let us know in the community channel or message me in the methods previously stated. Seth@deis.com is my email. But if you have things that you're using already that maybe you forked the Deis v1, submit your PRs soon if you want them in the final LTS release, which will be released on that week of February 13th or earlier. And make sure to CC Matt Borsma, who is the workflow project lead on the issue that you submit or the PR to raise its visibility. So we make sure to get that in for the final locked in stone Deis V1 release. And we'll also make this known through our normal communication channels in the weeks ahead. So the Deis users email distribution, community Slack channel, and blog post. So with that, I actually see some members here I don't recognize, and I want to get some intros and ideas of how you're using Deis Workflow or Deis V1, what brings you here. So Jeremy, since you have your video on, I'm going to put you on the spot, and could you just give us an intro of what brings you here?
Sure. So I work for a company called Reaction Commerce. It's an open source Node app with a I guess the line I usually use is it's a very similar business model to WordPress. You know, the free open source version is always free, and the business model is hosting and you know, support stuff. So my main role there, it kind of crosses. We're a small enough company that it kind of crosses everything, but leans pretty heavily in the DevOps side of things. And I'm building the back end for the hosting product, which is of course been completely Docker based since the beginning, but Kubernetes and Deis are a weeks old endeavor at this point. So we're new to the platform, and I'm personally fairly new to Kubernetes, or at least digging in depth enough to build something that I could rely on anyway. Yeah, so I'm really just getting started with everything. But we have another basically what the end users interface with, which kind of goes in front of our entire backend. We have another Node app, which is kind of it's managing the user subscriptions and all of that stuff, and kind of the gatekeeper of what people have access to for infrastructure. But is essentially the core of our hosting platform, and we've been using Rancher to manage our infrastructure for pretty much the last year. For those that aren't familiar with Rancher, it's basically just Docker orchestration, across multiple hosts and clouds, and it's managed networking and takes a lot of the manual steps out of that. Fairly recently, their most recent release, actually, basically everybody's using it, but it's not officially released for another week or so, added Kubernetes management. I mean, they added that a few months back, but the official release with, it's actually production safe, is coming out in this release. So that made it really interesting for us. So that makes managing, infinite amount of Kubernetes deployments. It's something you can do in a UI. You can do it across any cloud provider, and updates are entirely managed. It takes a lot of the manual stuff out of it, which for us, being a small startup with limited resources in that department, is a really awesome tool to have. So as of recently, we've been tying that all together with your product, and kind of trying to get things up and running with that. One of the biggest reasons we were drawn to Deis in the first place was we have basically two different customer types. There's the, go sign up in a web page and it launches, it launches containers for you and you have your own app instance. And there's the other type of more advanced user that is able to, use our CLI to do, reaction deploy, and it basically does what the git push deploy does in Deis. So we originally were going to have to build a lot of that back end, which sounded crazy as the one person who was going to have to do that. So coming across something that already works pretty well at that was really attractive really fast. So we're kind of molding our infrastructure into working with workflow, and so far, it's a lot of ground to cover, and a lot of research and reading and educational time, but certainly way faster than me building all that myself. So always love to avoid reinventing the wheel whenever possible. So yeah, we're pretty excited to be using the product. But
yeah, that's a really cool summary of what you've been up to. It's a lot of detail, and you are, with the DevOps job title, totally doing everything now.
Yeah. I think my official title is just software engineer, which is kind of hilarious because it just that means whatever you'd like. That means it depends on what day it is. Because I mean, there's plenty of time that I'm just working on the node, the main app, and not doing any DevOps stuff for weeks. But we're only 5. It's 10 or 11 people total, and 5 of us are developers. So it's fairly small, and 2 or 3 of those developers are mostly front end. So pretty limited resources, and everybody kind of has to do a little bit of everything. But I generally enjoy that. It means there's a whole lot to keep up with, because there's a whole lot to keep up with in any one of those separate disciplines. But yeah, it's keeps it interesting.
Yeah, as Fisher said, startup life for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So as I go around and highlight other people's names that I don't know, feel free to verbally say no, you don't want to introduce yourself, or add something in the chat message that says no, I don't want to introduce myself. And I always welcome seeing your face as you kind of tell us what you're up to. So Matt K42, I do know you, I believe. You want to introduce yourself? Give me a rundown of what you've been up to, what brings you here?
Yeah, definitely. So I work at Sphero, so just down the street from you guys. I'm on our platform team, where we actually collect various metrics that can come back from our box. So how people are using them, and how often, and how many are out there in the wild, just getting that kind of information. So we write a lot of different apps that do various things with that data, and other things that also support on the back end for the apps that you control the box with. So we run mostly Ruby apps, but we have a big collection of various services that could be written in anything. So having things in a platform like Deis really helps us, so that we can build everything using build packs, and don't need to support all of these different apps in general on their own. So everything was in Heroku before I got here, which was rather expensive for us. So we decided to move on to our own infrastructure, and it just so happened that we came across Deis V1, started using that for quite a while, and moved along with Deis V2 once that got released. So we've been using it for quite a while now. I think probably going on a year at this point. Production maybe 9 months, something like that. So I'm pretty familiar with it, and it's been doing really great for us. Everybody, I'm the only one who manages our infrastructure. We have 4 other developers that are working on all of the apps and everything on top of it. So they really are more of like the end users, and I'm the one that's putting our clusters together, doing all of our upgrades and everything. So yeah, it seems like everybody has really been on board with it and really seems to enjoy it.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. I think the last time we spoke was about April, May at the DevOps Days Rockies event.
Yep.
Cool to see you're still using workflow or previous versions in some form of transition. So with that, Jetsada, which I recognize, thanks for the alias, Sinusoid. You want to introduce yourself and tell us what brings you here?
Sure. So basically, I'm from Hotel Quickly, which is some startup in. I'm actually in Bangkok. You can see like it's almost like 3 a.m. here. It's like pretty sleepy maybe. So basically, our company doing some like hotel booking, and we are kind of moving toward the microservice. That's the reason why we are moving into this kind of Deis. We actually using Deis from like the Deis V1, and actually when there is a V2 release, we kind of move our whole infrastructure from Amazon to GCP for only to host this Deis V2 in the Google Cloud engines. Yeah, that's basically. Yeah, like long story short.
Yeah, cool. We also like migrating things whole hog onto other stacks. So you're in company here. I think we Boersma, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we were doing most of our testing on Deis V1 on Amazon, and then when we switched to be in the Kubernetes world, we started doing everything in GCP as well.
That is correct, but we still need to broaden our automated testing and get back to AWS. Just GCP is the path of least resistance, really. So that's where we started.
Yeah.
Sorry, that something is still left in AWS, but yeah, we slowly moving everything here. So.
Cool. Thanks for the intro. And I might butcher this name, but Stanislaw? And it's totally fine if you just want to listen and not speak up. Cool. I can only assume you're working in a very loud factory and cannot speak up because there's just too much action happening around you. What about Simon? All right, maybe just a listener. And then Remus, an old friend. Do you wanna talk about what you've been up to recently, Remus?
Remus.
Cool. And then Archie K, you're brand new into this meeting, and I'm just asking for if you want to introduce yourself, tell us what you're doing with Deis Workflow or Deis V1. So you can have the floor if you want. You're welcome to say no in chat or verbally if you're frightened by this clan of people asking you to introduce yourself. That is truly putting him on the spot as he just enters and then gets the floor. So I think with that, that wraps up this community meeting. Just a reminder, we're going to rename this meeting Workflow Community Meeting since we had a name collision with Deis V1 being a company and a project, and Workflow is the project name moving forward. So with that, have a good rest of the day or have a good night if you're in Bangkok. Get some sleep. See y'all later.